Welcome back to the channel and to the next installment in our Moving Wisely series. In the last episode, we dropped a bombshell and announced that we're moving out of this place and closing down. But that doesn't mean we're closing down for good.
However, the skip has arrived, so what it does mean is ripping this place down.
Whoa, steady on, Martin. Whether we like it or not, this has been our home for the last 6.5 years. So before it's too late, let's have a quick walk around and document some of the things we've done here and generally have a look at the place. Whether you've started your own business before or you're interested in starting your own one for the first time, one thing's for sure, there's a lot of costs and there's never really enough money. Sometimes you've got to come up with out-of-the-box ideas, and what I'd like to do is show you some of the things we did so that either you can copy them or maybe it will give you a bit of an idea to come up with some clever things yourself. I'm not saying that mine are particularly clever, but you know what I mean. Let's start with this area here, which is the space that customers typically first see when they walk in. It's kind of like our customer area, waiting area, sales desk. So it was important to try and smarten it up and make it look quite good. And that leads me on to talking about this wood paneling. So whenever you're renting something commercial, or residential actually, there's kind of two things constantly on your mind in terms of alterations. Firstly is whether you're actually allowed to or whether you need to sort of get permission. In our case, this is a railway arch, so they're very, very stringent on what is allowed and what isn't. You pretty much have to have written sort of approval for every hole you drill into these panels. So that's one thing to consider. And then the second thing is, as we're literally learning in this episode, everything you put in and invest, one day you're gonna have to rip out. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So with both those things in mind, my recommendation is try to keep it simple, but make it sort of look impactful. And we came up with this kind of wooden backdrop, and it literally just holds on using screw holes which were already there for some electrical trunking. And because of its shape, it's like a U shape, it actually holds itself in place as well. And it's just MDF board, we painted it grey, and then we kind of just nailed on these wood slats that you can see here. So bang for buck, it was not expensive at all, and it's made for what I'd say looks, you know, reasonably smart given our overall environment. On that note, and regarding keeping costs down, do consider where you're putting your money, because some things in hindsight I would say don't scrimp on. And for example, flooring. I went and picked basically the cheapest lino floor I could find, and then I stuck it down using basically the cheapest method you can, which is rather than gluing the whole thing down, just tacking the edges. And unfortunately over time, being a high traffic area where people keep coming and going, it's stretched, it's ripped under here, for example, and generally just looks a bit awful. And the other lesson we learned regarding sort of trying to keep costs down and where you shouldn't is that we installed some funky LED lighting behind here, but we used sort of the most basic kind of made in China stuff I could find. And if I turn it on, you'll see that after about a year or so, it just started going wrong and started flickering. So now we basically just have a disco here. Before we move on, I almost forgot, one final thing which embraces that whole high impact, low cost initiative is these here. We've got metal paneling here and a big area to create signage. So what did we do? Well, we just got these made out of styrofoam. We screwed some magnets on the back and we just stuck them on. On the opposite side of this space, we have this colourful wall. Now, we got the graphics designed by someone off Fiverr.com, which is a bit hit and miss, but generally is a really good resource when you're starting out. It's essentially like having a load of freelancers available to you with gigs starting from as little as $5, I think. But yeah, 5.5, 6 years on, I'm not particularly fond of it. It's a little bit embarrassing, but it was quite colourful and it brightened up the space. And we started using this area for our auto trader photography, and a lot of people said that the adverts were really colourful and eye-catching. The reason I bring it up though is twofold. Firstly, again, keeping with that high impact, low cost idea, this is literally just vinyl stickers which we stuck onto the corrugated panels, which are the same panels you saw on the other side. And in terms of bang for buck, to colour this area rather than sort of cladding it, putting a new surface on. This is as cheap as it gets. However, obviously you have to get the vinyl done, and we stumbled upon a company called antgraphics.com or .co.uk. We'll put the correct website underneath, and they did a fantastic job of taking the original sort of raw image file and essentially sort of cutting it down so that we're only printing the bits we needed, which was genius, and it meant for a much easier install. And the other thing about that, and the fact that we use vinyl, excuse all the mess because we've already started packing some things, but 5-6 years on, we've got a huge benefit now, because rather than spending hours removing paneling or stuff, this is now just gonna peel off. And okay, we've got to repeat that a few times, but in terms of ease, it doesn't get much easier than that. We had to divide the arch into essentially 3 different areas. So it meant for some kind of partitioning. Now, obviously with the aforementioned issues about getting permission for doing anything, and also the outright cost per square meter of erecting any kind of walls or anything like that, we considered all the options and came up with a bit of an out-the-box idea, which is using curtains. Per square meter, there is pretty much no cheaper way that you can cover an area. Obviously, you also get the versatility of being able to open and close the areas, and this is just basic residential curtains available on eBay, Amazon, whatever, albeit in the largest size they do, just so that we could get the headroom. But yeah, it's 3 panels on just cheap and cheerful plastic rails. And again, once we had the brainwave of using magnets, we went a bit trigger happy with it. And these are sort of large magnets that we use to basically just hold the curtains in place. So now we're in an area which doesn't get broadcasted much, and not many of you have seen. We're behind that first curtain. And behind here, we actually installed a turntable. And behind that, behind the staging, we have our workshop and our ramp. This brings me on to one of the biggest lessons I learned and mistakes that I made, which was making concrete, quite literally, plans very early on without first seeing where the business will go and how we're going to use the space. But essentially the idea was that cars can drive past the photography area and also the handover area, that we were going to use this space a lot more than we did, and through that second curtain onto the ramp into the workshop area. Now, when we came up with that plan, we really weren't anticipating using that ramp much. Maybe once or twice per week to take some wheels off or do some more detailed polishing, but really it's now being used almost 2 or 3 times a day for servicing, repairs and stuff like that, which meant that this huge investment that we did in terms of installing a turntable kind of ended up wasted. So if there's a lesson to be learned from my mistake, it's just try and keep things, I guess, as modular as possible, and don't make any kind of firm decisions on where you're going to put things, erect walls, until you've given it a few months and seen how you're going to use the space. Because yeah, we learned unfortunately the hard way. We installed everything pretty much before we even started trading, and literally within a few weeks we kind of realized it's just not going to work because of this sort of bottleneck situation. So it didn't get utilized much and was pretty much a waste of money. So we're now standing actually on the turntable, and the turntable's on a micro cement floor because it needed a really flat finish. But everything else around it, including the ramp that you just saw that the cars used to drive onto the ramp, and also if I pull this back, as you drive through onto the ramp, all this area around, basically everywhere where you can see these brown tiles, this is basically a raised floor built out of wood. It's, I think, 3x2 kind of joists, and it's just a very versatile material. It's quite quick to put up and hopefully will be quite quick to remove. And you'd never think it's wood. You'd think, you know, it's either concrete or something like that, but it's worked. We did some calculations on how much wood to use. The areas where cars will be actually driving past were reinforced with extra bits. So there's sort of more wood here than, for example, here. And it's stood the test of time. I know it's looking very dirty and it's a mess because everything at the moment is upside down. But yeah, it has worked, and it is something I would consider doing again. And the main beauty here is by building the wood up to the level of the turntable and the scissor lift, it meant that we didn't have to either spend a lot of money trenching into the concrete floor that was already here, which then you'd have to undo and fill now, or actually build up concrete, which is again going to be expensive to chisel out. The last thing to say back here is somewhat kind of automotive industry specific, but nevertheless might as well mention it, which is do not underestimate how much space you're going to need for general clutter. Now, we try to keep a tight ship here, and almost everything's already been removed, believe it or not. But when you're trying to be efficient and keep every size tire in stock, etc., you've just got tires and wheels everywhere. And another thing to consider is cars waiting on parts and stuff like that. It's just not something that I ever considered when we originally sort of planned the thing, and it's nothing to do with the servicing. It can also be just a car you're selling that's waiting on a panel or this or that, and you've got to kind of park it to one side and wait for that part. So plan for loads of space for parts, tires and things like that, because you accumulate it so quickly. And also just think ahead in terms of trying to make sure you've got some space for kind of long-term projects or cars where something's gone wrong out of your control, and for whatever reason it's now stuck with you for weeks, sometimes months. Going back to the subject of keeping things flexible and modular and trying to avoid expensive permanent modifications early on, I might have got it wrong with the turntable, but one thing that I am pleased that we didn't do is install a mezzanine. Above where you are now in the front area, the original plan was to install a mezzanine that pretty much covered the entire area. I think off the top of my head the cost of that was going to be about £25,000 plus VAT, and I remember at the time thinking that's a huge amount of money. Ironically, these days I think the cost would now be double because of how everything's gone up. But yeah, it would have been essentially from your electric journey starts here sign to roughly above where you're standing now, and it would have given us a lot more desk space, storage space. It also, though, would have meant a hell of a lot of extra expense in terms of lighting, because we would have to light up there and also down here. But 6.5 years later, I'm pleased we didn't install it. Obviously, it would have improved our productivity. It might have meant we could have had a bigger headcount because there would have been more space for people, but the place itself was a bottleneck, and we kind of were at saturation point in terms of how many cars we could keep getting in and out. So it wouldn't have actually added a lot of value, and I don't think it would have paid itself back. But like with everything I've been talking about in this video, it would then need removing. And again, that is a cost, and it's something that you've got to consider at the beginning, because it's always going to come, even if you pretend it won't.
That's enough of Arthur talking. He is now crying in the corner as the reality of the move is sinking in. But that means the exciting bit. And we got help all the way from Wales. The guys over from Vanza are going to be taking the turntable, because, as Arthur mentioned, it wasn't used much. It will get a second life that's not going in the skip, but to access it and to disassemble it into pieces to move it into the truck, the floor has to come up as well. There is initially a little bit of confusion about how to remove the components, but after a quick FaceTime call to a carpenter, everybody falls into rhythm.
That's the turntable gone, and a big thank you again to the guys from Vanza for coming to collect it and helping with the removal. It was a big part of what we needed to do, but there's still an awful lot to get on with, so we're going to keep cracking on with that. Slight oversight was leaving a car on the ramp before we removed it, because although i3s have reasonably good ground clearance, it's going to be difficult to drive it off that drop there, but there's nothing like a reason to crack on with the job, because we've got to get this car off the ramp in 2 days' time.
To speed up the removal of the floor, Emma comes up with a genius solution to use the workshop trolley jack to easily lift entire sections. That, combined with Arthur's body weight, does the trick. Even the dog is impressed.
It's day 2 of the teardown, and yesterday was quite productive. It might not look like we achieved a lot, but at least we came up with a system. So although there's still a lot to do, at least we know now how we're going to do it. I'm here today on my own, so I'm not expecting a huge amount of progress, but I have set myself a goal, which is to try and get up to the front of the ramp. And these kind of corner bits have been coming out pretty easily. I think now that I'm into kind of large square sections, the going's going to get a bit tougher. On that note, unfortunately, a slight setback. If I just show you on the trolley jack, unfortunately, I seem to have lost a sort of like a circlip. So this arm, which is half of what holds up the lifting platform, is kind of insecure. That said, I need to do a bit of a clear up anyway, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to keep my eye out for the one that we've actually lost. I don't know if I've lost it today or yesterday. Hey. As you'll have seen, I decided to finish the jobs on the i3 which I had on the ramp rather than risk it getting damaged and just drive it off, which thanks to the i3's short overhangs was nice and easy. However, that has now bit into my time a little bit, and I have less than an hour left before I have to leave. So I think realistically the chances of getting up to the ramp are reduced, but we will see how we go. As this wood sort of buckles and starts bending using the technique we've been using, all this stuff here, all this kind of tools and stuff will start kind of falling over and lifting up now. Crazy as it sounds, we do still have a couple more jobs that we need this ramp for in the next few days, so if I can keep the tools where they are, that would be quite handy. There we have it. Unfortunately, I have failed to get to the milestone that I set, which was trying to break up the floor up to the ramp. Unfortunately, the deeper I go with the trolley jack, the more this is all tilting, and that desk there, everything's just starting to fall over when I'm kind of jumping up and down to try and break the wood. So unfortunately, just got to do it the proper way, which is to pack everything up, but I'll do that tomorrow with a calm head. And yeah, at least there's some progress, and we'll pick this up tomorrow. Only a short day today, but quite a lot of progress. Managed to get the floor up to the ramp, and just in time as well, because I've got this i3 which I need to do something on today, and I'll quickly just show you what that is. The car's in for a service, but it's also in because the customer was getting some clonking noises from the suspension. Now usually that would be either the gator material getting caught up in the bump stop, or it'll be the top mount, and actually in this case it's the damper, which we're starting to see quite a lot. This is a 2014 car, so it's basically 10 years old, and that's the offending article there. And if you've seen dampers before, the push rod should not be so far in, and if I pull that out, you can see it is basically dead. New Bilstein part is in. Might as well change the top mount, even though the old one is actually still okay. It's going to be there for 5+ years, so good opportunity to change it. New gator, coil was all good. Now the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed that I'm doing the job with the road wheel on, and you might be wondering, why is Arthur doing that? Well, I'm glad you asked. It is because of previous human interaction, which is probably 50% of the work we need to do. It's because of someone having done something before not quite right. In this case, this car's got 3 summer tyres, and for some random reason this one's a winter, which is younger than all the others, so I think it's been in for a tyre change. And of course they've used a pneumatic impact wrench to tighten the bolts, and the locking wheel nut has damaged just here. Unfortunately, it has spun. These aren't really designed to take any torque, they're there as a sort of anti-theft thing. We did call the customer to say, look, this wheel has been hugely over torqued. Corresponding bolts were actually kind of in excess of about 250 Newton meters, so chances are that locking wheel bolt is as well. Obviously, as is the case in these kind of scenarios, before going ham on that one, we did loosen all 3 others, so that in the event of that one breaking, which we explained is likely to happen, at least then the other 3 are out, and this car can be taken somewhere for that one to be extracted, and you can just buy a whole fresh set, and it doesn't matter whether it corresponds with this or not. So yeah, just a bit of forward thinking there to save the customer grief. But we did explain we will try to get the job done with the wheel in place, and yeah, a little bit unorthodox, but I am managing.
It's Monday, which means I'm back in the office, and we officially have less than 7 days to hand the keys back. So the plan is that Arthur will continue working in the back, but obviously this entire front room also needs tearing down, so I will help out with that.
Okay, Wednesday morning I completely lost track of how many days we've actually been clearing out for. But what's important is that we only have a few days left and we are at that stage where it looks worse before it hopefully improves in the next couple of days. In fact, speaking of that, we only have 4 full days of work left to finalize everything, so we made a little list. Unfortunately, some of the things have spilled over into today from yesterday. The most annoying one being this concrete or micro cement or whatever it is. But while this side actually went off fairly okay, even with some new tools we got to help out on here, this is really stubborn. I don't know whether it just set better or anything, but yeah, this is proving to be quite hard work. As you can see also behind me, the mold needs to go. Just like the turntable, the scissor lift also has plenty of life left in it, so that's getting collected, and the guys help us remove the very heavy crossmember for the rearmost portal. Skips are swapped and we can turn our attention to the front room. Arthur stays late to remove the fence paneling and we pick up where we left off the following day. There's finally some visible change, but with this being the last day to finish everything, it's all hands on deck.
If you've got a concrete floor that needs fixing, dial 0208 050 7600 and ask for Emma, who it appears is an absolute miracle worker when it comes to repairing concrete. Look how smooth that is. Well done, Emma.
Progress update, as we haven't done one in a while. That's because we were super busy. As you can see, it's dark outside. It's the Saturday evening, 10:30 p.m, which means we should have been done by now, but as you can see in the background, Arthur is still working away, and in fact he's quite stressed, so he doesn't want to be on camera. And that's because everything seems to be taking longer than expected. So let me walk you through what has happened so far. The rear of the arch is pretty much complete. The paint on the floor has dried to the touch. We had to paint the floor even though it was in an atrocious state when we moved in. Likewise, we had to clean the side walls and the barrel, but now all of that had to be repeated going forward. And as you can see, we are only about halfway down the arch. Yes, in slightly usual wisely automotive fashion, we are cheating a little bit by Arthur staying overnight, so the floor can be done all the way up until the entrance and have as much time to dry as possible. Speaking of which, a little bit of a curveball. This is our backup hoover. The main one broke about a month ago and we thought we would get by with this one until we move into the new premises. And this one was absolutely essential because we were about to hoover the floor before the paint goes down to make sure it sticks as best as it can. But this one literally broke a couple of minutes ago, so we will have to improvise. I went to our local Tesco and this is what I got. Ignore the food. This is what we will hopefully manage to make work. A couple of mops, a lot of microfiber cloths, etc. Because believe it or not, even though it's a big Tesco Extra, they don't sell hoovers. How ridiculous is that? We find a good system where Arthur is cleaning the ceiling just before I come in with the paint, working section by section, back to front. 8:41 in the morning. The last passes. Arthur is dead, but all the floor is pretty much done. So now we just have to wait a day and then move all of these skirting boards back into place.
Well, it's D-Day and somehow we got there just. The handback is in about 45 minutes and we're just doing a few final bits and bobs. But yeah, signs off. Not a week that I'll remember fondly, but yeah, a huge thank you to Martin and Emma for putting in incredible hours getting it done. But yeah, let me just quickly show you around. We have a newly painted floor. Martin's here, just finishing off a few bits and bobs with these plinths. Pretty much every inch of the plastic barrel lining has been cleaned. All the electrics have been reinstated. Rear infills painted. High-level glazing cleaned, kitchen redecorated. We've basically done everything that we've been asked to. Most importantly, in comparison to how it looked when we got it, it is night and day different. I mean, we'll try and overlay maybe some photos from 2018 when we got the keys, but it was a really sorry sight. Hopefully Archco are happy and they don't make any deductions from our deposit. We will find out how that goes and we will keep you posted on it. And above all else, that's it now for this site. It's a bit bittersweet. Obviously, if we had come to some kind of agreement with Archco, we probably would have stayed here for a few more years, but it's great to have had that shove that we needed to just get on with it and move out. And now there's really exciting things ahead, which will all be revealed soon. So yeah, stay posted. And in the next episode, we will find out how the Archco handback went.
Now the only thing which we need to wait for is the deposit, and I'm sure there will be no problems with that whatsoever.
So yeah, it's weird not having anywhere to go. There's our first i8. As you can see, he's pretty grounded already. In fact, he's pretty much horizontal, I'd say. Oh my God. And it just so happens I've passed 2 houses, which between them have 3 i3s.
There you have it, Northerners. Hopefully you're all happy now.